I found a very smart guy, and our strategy was having in Dubai an arm to see what cool projects are around worked out, because we found the guys in Dubai for Bitcoin OS, and Yago is joining me now on stage. Yago lives in the UK, but came over today. Hillary is also somewhere hiding in the audience over there, so if you want to talk to another one of the founders, Hillary is there as well. Yago, please come to me and tell us a little bit about what you guys are doing. I'm super excited.
Ralph, thank you very much for the invite and the wonderful introduction. You've put together a very interesting room. I've had the opportunity with some of you to speak. And from the conversations that I've had so far this evening, the feeling that I get is that the room is basically split down the middle. Roughly half of the people here are entrepreneurs working in the crypto space, and roughly half of the people here are more from traditional finance and banking. So we have oil and water. And I think there's a really crucial question to ask here, and this is the best room to ask, right? Do we think that crypto is doing well, right? Is it providing significant and important, productive, powerful, and valuable innovation? So that's the question I want to ask here, and I think it's going to be an exciting discussion specifically for the two kinds of people who are in the room tonight. For me, this has been a very crucial question. So, 13 years ago, I was at Carnegie Mellon University working on artificial intelligence. At the time, we didn't call it artificial intelligence, we called it neural networks, because it was basically artificial stupidity at that point. But my belief was this was going to be the most significant technology that I could be working on. And so I was working on ways of using neural networks to improve diagnostics, and I was reading a lot in the various papers in network science. And it was in those papers, buried in those papers, was one paper which was so exciting that it made me think that there's maybe an innovation that is even more important than AI and neural networks. And that paper was the Bitcoin white paper. And so 13 years ago, I made a very significant decision for me, which was I switched from being focused on AI to being focused on Bitcoin. And here we are today, 13 years later, and artificial intelligence, I don't know how many of you guys have been using this and utilizing the tools that are coming out, but it is an extremely exciting time in artificial intelligence. The innovation is unmistakable and undeniable. And so the question I'm going to ask myself here publicly in front of you is, did I make a good choice? So, over the last few years, we have seen remarkable success. Remarkable, right? We've seen a asset, Bitcoin, start from nothing. In fact, worse than nothing, a joke, a scam, a confusion. And in the course of just 15 years, it has become a core component of many people's portfolios. It has become its own asset class. It has introduced for people, for the first time ever, digital value that can exist anywhere in the world and be teleported from one place in the world to one other place in the world, from one person to another, effectively, instantaneously. It is really the only asset you can truly own. Everything else, you need someone else's permission to own. And we're now at the stage where it is being deeply integrated. We have a an S&P 500 company which is basically turned its business into just buying Bitcoin. We have a Bitcoin ETF, and we have the upcoming President of the United States of America talking about creating a strategic Bitcoin reserve. We have the same thing happening in Switzerland. We have countries which have already done this. Bitcoin has become an established asset. And that is fantastic. That is, I think, beyond. In fact, I can tell you when I shifted to Bitcoin, I read the white paper, and in the middle of the white paper, I was already writing an email to everyone I knew saying, this is the most exciting thing I've seen. One day, I said, all of Bitcoin will be worth $1 billion. Today it is worth $2 trillion. So even what I thought were wildly over-optimistic assumptions of how valuable this would become have been surpassed again and again and again and again. But at the same time, I said that the other half of this room appeared to be people who come from banking, and not just banking, Swiss banking. And the question I would ask is, have these people changed the way they behave? Has their business changed? Has the way they transact value changed? Has the business logic, right? The security assumptions, the way they actually move value from one place to another, has that been impacted at all? And I think broadly speaking, the answer is no. So on the one hand, we've created a lot of wealth and a very important asset class, and we've given people the ability to actually own something. But on the other hand, the sort of story that we've been telling ourselves, the story that Vitalik came here 11 years ago, I think it was, right? And told the world about Ethereum, right? That we are creating the internet of value, that has not materialized. And that is a very, very big problem for the bankers, because they still have to work the same way they've been working for effectively 500 years, but it's an even bigger problem for the entrepreneurs, because if there's no product market fit, then it's very hard to build a business. And so a certain cynicism has set into the crypto world, which I think anyone who's even tangentially familiar, right? We've always had to deal with people calling Bitcoin a scam, but now we have this problem where people will say, well, what has it actually produced? Right? Here we are, it has grown so big, it has become so valuable, and we have people in the Bitcoin ecosystem, in the crypto ecosystem themselves, people who have been like me for many, many years, devoted to this industry, saying, well, actually, maybe the only thing it needs to be is digital gold, which is very, very important, but certainly not, I think, the level of innovation that we were anticipating. Okay, so we have a question here. We've got an industry which has generated a great deal of value. We have an industry which is seeing phenomenal adoption. We also have an industry which, in terms of many of its other promises, seems to be primarily about speculation, about a casino, a giant global 24/7, very, very exciting, very flashy light casino, but hasn't generated changes in the way that we actually move value around. And so the question I would like to ask is why? Why are we here after so much here? You know, Ethereum itself grew into a multi-$100 billion project. Thousands of developers have worked on it. Thousands of businesses have been built on it. It has produced phenomenal technologies. Why has this not yet embedded itself more concretely in our lives? And I think I have an answer. And the answer I have is this. If you look at crypto, well, actually, I think the term people generally use is, if you look at the blockchain industry, what you see is a great deal of fragmentation. Everyone needs their own blockchain, right? You have to create your own token, you have to raise money, so you go and you create your own blockchain. And as a result, the entire industry has fragmented. And you have very, very complicated technologies. Ethereum itself is a very, very complicated piece of software, which as a result, no one developer fully understands, and it is very hard to trust. And we also have an industry which, because of the fragmentation and because of the complexity, is notorious for having a terrible user experience. Satoshi, when he first published Bitcoin, version 0.010, the very, very first version, it came out with an application, with a service, with something that you could do with Bitcoin built into the code. It was supposed to be a global game of poker that no one could cheat in, that you could move Bitcoin around and play poker with Bitcoin. And the parts of the code, the remnants of the code that we still have left in it, that application, the world's first decentralized application, was called Poker Lobby. And Satoshi saw it, right? And you know how in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, and he looked upon his creation and said, it is good. Well, Satoshi looked upon his creation and said, this is terrible. And he pulled it out because he realized that if you wanted to hard code every single potential use case for Bitcoin into Bitcoin, you would have a real problem. So he just pulled it out and left Bitcoin extremely thin, extremely simple, extremely reliable, a perfect pure play ledger for any asset, and specifically for BTC. And then the other player in our sort of history here is Vitalik, who had been banging his head, like many of us, against this problem of how do you add more services, more functionality, more ability to actually use Bitcoin. And so he went and created Ethereum. And what Ethereum did is basically the opposite of what Satoshi decided to do, right? Where Satoshi had pulled out the application, in Ethereum, they added in the logic for the applications. They added in a programming language. They added in all of this complexity. And over time, Ethereum has gotten bigger and bigger and more sluggish and more expensive until eventually we ended up where we are today, where Ethereum has stopped growing. And even the people who are building in the Ethereum ecosystem are primarily building systems which are no longer even on Ethereum. They're called rollups, right? And so things have been moving away from Ethereum. And so what we need, if we actually want to see, and I think we've known this from the very beginning, but we haven't had the technology. What we need, if we want to allow Bitcoin to trustlessly allow people to build services on it, services like high-speed transactions, services like banking, services like lending, services like poker, in fact, anything that people can imagine, even the ability for AIs to transact and utilize Bitcoin, we need to have a way in which we can build on the reliability and the trust that is Bitcoin without making Bitcoin any more complicated. And so the exciting thing is, and this has been a problem, that many of us, and me personally, and the people who have been working with me on Bitcoin OS, been thinking about and working on for at least 10 years, realizing that this was the biggest problem in the industry. The problem that would allow the bankers and the entrepreneurs to actually start working together, and therefore would open up the ability for us together to provide services to the world. And so what we've done with Bitcoin OS is think very deeply about how can we solve this problem. Is it even solvable? Because over the years, more and more people cynically came to the conclusion that perhaps this problem was impossible to solve. And 4 years ago, we created a research group because we became convinced that there actually was a technology out there that could solve this problem. It's a kind of cryptography which allows you to take computation, condense that computation, and write it to Bitcoin. The problem is that Bitcoin couldn't understand this cryptography. It's called zero-knowledge cryptography, and basically means that Bitcoin can understand the computation while having zero knowledge of the computation. So we started working on the question of whether or not we could bring this to Bitcoin. And then at the end of 2023, we suddenly realized we had probably figured it out. A few months later, we had written and published a white paper, which was extremely exciting. It was called Bitsnark and Grail, the two technologies that we were going to introduce. And then a few months ago at the largest Bitcoin conference in the world, for the first time ever, we showed the ability to take any kind of compute, compress it, fold it into a zero-knowledge proof, and write it to Bitcoin, where Bitcoin would be able to verify it and execute it. In other words, taking any kind of computation and turning it into a service for Bitcoin. It was on that day in the 853rd, after 853,000 plus blocks of Bitcoin, that we finally gave Bitcoin effectively eyes and a brain. And what we've been doing with Bitcoin OS ever since is building out a system which is going to make it, and is already making it easy for developers to build whatever they want in and on Bitcoin. It allows chains, like we have some representatives of various chains here. We have Eternity here, right? Yes, there they are. This is one of the projects this is another chain which is building now on Bitcoin OS so that it can integrate into Bitcoin. And we have some of the largest chains in the world doing the same thing. We have entrepreneurs thinking how they can start building on Bitcoin. And if you are an entrepreneur in this room, I would be very happy to chat with you to help explain how that can be done. And we've now also started to have more institutional players asking if they can do the same thing. Is it possible to do settlement and issuance of bonds or real world assets? What we finally have is a tool which can deal with the fragmentation of crypto by allowing all chains to integrate with the security and act as computation layers for a single system, Bitcoin. Not only does it deal with the fragmentation, it also deals with the complexity, because Bitcoin remains very, very simple and can act as this perfectly reliable and secure settlement system. And finally, it can deal with this UI, UX, this user experience problem, by providing a standardized set of tools, a standardized set of interfaces, and most importantly, a standardized level of security, Bitcoin level security, to the entire crypto space. The truth is that every single major new technological paradigm, right, from mainframes to personal computers to mobile phones, only really became exciting once they finally got an operating system that could integrate all of the complexity. It's sort of been under our noses that we need an operating system for the world of crypto, and it needs to be built in Bitcoin. And so that's what we're doing with Bitcoin OS. And I think that the future, I'm not going to have to choose between blockchain and AI, because they, like any form of computation, are going to work together. We're going to be able to take AI and make it transparent and secure on Bitcoin, and we're going to allow payments to be managed by Bitcoin, and we're going to create, for the first time, after we've been talking about it for 11 years, finally a world of verifiable, open, and decentralized computation, because it's finally practical. Thank you very much.